Happy grand final week, everyone. As we sit here, we're one prelim away from the big dance. This week is the Christmas of footy. I love this week so much. There's an energy in the air like nothing else. So for the Footy with Mates episode that transpires with the biggest week on the footy calendar, I've chosen a really interesting chat. At the start of the 2024 season, now essentially pretty much 2 seasons ago, I chatted with Reverend Tim Costello, the chairman of the Alliance for Gambling Reform, and we talked about gambling in the AFL and its prevalence and how its absolute presence was everywhere in sports media. We talked about reform being put in place and how much we were on the road to seeing less gambling on our TVs when we're watching footy. And since then, essentially nothing has changed. What happened? Why hasn't anything changed? A majority of Australia support this. Now, that sounds very serious, but I promise you that this chat's going to be ripper fun because I've got a dead set gun joining me today. The independent senator for Canberra, David Pocock, is a Zimbabwe-born ex-captain of the Wallabies, an absolute gun, a fellow follically challenged gun, and an advocate for parliament reform. I've brought him in today to chat this ridiculous career, his life, but also to educate on why we can't seem to get less gambling on our screen. Happy finals, everyone. Please welcome our new mate, David Pocock. G'day.
Hey, Broden.
How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
It's an honour. For research in preparation for this, I watched your Australian story on the ABC a few days ago, and it has one of the funniest openings to an Australian story ever because it's the Canberra politics touch rugby game. So there's a bunch of like elbows playing and all these sort of older people kicking the footy around. And then there's just a shot of you at would have been the age of about 35, fresh out of playing professional rugby, just dominating. Can I first ask, what's that like to play in that game?
Parliamentary sport is a lot of fun. So, Tuesday mornings we play touch footy, Wednesday mornings we play soccer, and it's a great way to get to know other members of Parliament that you don't usually spend a lot of time with. The touch footy, it's good. Numbers vary a lot in winter. Huge number of people out there at 7 a.m. But yeah, it's good fun and people have a good crack.
You do you hold back or do you really just say I'm going to dominate this because I was one of the best players in the world at this sport?
No one likes one of those heroes, social touch footy. So I just enjoy it, and there's genuinely skillful players. It's a fairly small field, so it's a good run around.
I'm sure you're asked this question a lot, but I am genuinely fascinated by it. Coming from a career as a professional sports person in Australia, like on the national, international scale, to moving into politics, how drastically different is it? Because I've moved from doing comedy to footy world, and there's the way people engage in the different communities is just so vast. How's it been jumping between those two?
It's been nuts. Not something I thought I would do. And after I retired, I was very happily off doing other things, sort of working in conservation on a few different projects. And then a group in Canberra actually kept approaching me saying, "Hey, we think there's an opportunity for an independent to run for the Senate, and your name keeps coming up. Would you do it?" Initially, I was like, "Absolutely not. Like, good luck with it." But that is not for me. The more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I'm frustrated with politics, and I've loved the opportunity that Australia has given me as an immigrant. And at some point, if you're frustrated and you think things aren't working, you've got to put your hand up and see if you can do things differently. And I thought I probably regret not having a crack at this. So it's been a steep learning curve. One of the great things about it actually has been when I retired from rugby. I remember saying to my wife, like, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours developing skills that are just totally useless for the rest of my life. Like, I'm never going to have to, try and get into a ruck and steal the ball. But I spent so much time getting good at that. And it was only really getting into politics and working in a small team that you realize, well, actually sport gives you so many skills that are transferable to other things. Work ethic, working in a small team, being able to take feedback on board. so it's actually been a lot of fun. And as an independent, I kind of work for the community and just get out there, listen to people, and then get into Parliament and go hard.
Who gets treated better on the road? So, like when you're an athlete, you get looked after on like the best Qantas flights or anything. But when you're a politician in Canberra, are you treated the same way as you are an athlete, or are they different traveling experiences?
Very different. I mean, there's lots of perks that the politicians like, chairman's lounge membership and all that sort of thing. I'm not here for that, and so don't go in there.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, I initially did accept it. Like, I think you can make all sorts of reasons why you want it. You can do interviews in there and have confidential conversations maybe in one of the private rooms, but the way that Qantas sort of been treated and some of the concerns around competition, and I don't know, it just felt really icky after a while, and I very happily gave it back. So yeah, there are those sorts of perks for people, but it's so different.
It kind of leans into what we will go into detail. I read your Saturday paper piece a few weeks ago, and it talks. That's why I genuinely wanted to talk to you about this stuff. So we'll dive into that in more detail shortly. But I guess before we get serious, like, you make a lot of good TikToks. How do you make a good TikTok when you're trying to talk about an issue?
I don't know.
Neither do I. I'm desperate to figure out how.
I mean, as a team, we talk a lot about how do you engage people in politics in a really meaningful way, not like sort of cringe, you throw out some Gen Z slang, but how do you talk about issues that really matter to people?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just about being genuine and trying to really get to the sort of heart of an issue and cut through some of the BS that often gets sort of thrown around.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That makes sense. If you figure out a real good way to do it, please let me know, because I'm 30. I'm similar to your age and I'm struggling. But I guess I feel like you're a relevant chat to us so much because you have transcended these two worlds. Is you might have a unique perspective on sport in Australia and its role in the Australian identity. Not necessarily with footy, but what do you feel things like AFL and rugby, and where does it sit in Australia's identity for you?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's I think we've seen a decline in organised religion in Australia and most of the Western world, but sport, that is something that brings people together from regional towns and your local footy club to places like Melbourne, and just how passionate people are about their club. And I think you see that during finals season where people are traveling across the country to go see their team, and booking tickets and paying all sorts of exorbitant amounts of money because they love it, and it does something for them, and it's a huge part of our culture. And I think that can be a great thing. Sport at its best creates places, environments where people can feel like they belong, like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and learn a whole bunch of life skills as they go through the ranks.
Oh yeah. So I'm curious to talk about, essentially, as I said at the start, we chatted with Tim Costello about gambling reform that was put forward. You're campaigning in the Senate at the moment with lobbying and how that's to make it a bit more transparent. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I've been blown away by how loose the rules are in Parliament House around lobbying. As a punter before I became a politician, you kind of assume that, well, maybe things aren't perfect, but at least we'd have some half decent rules. But man, it's loose. Like, we have such a poor definition of what a lobbyist is, that if you're in government relations for a big company, say, Qantas, Woodside, Santos, any of these really big companies where government regulation really does matter to them, you're not a lobbyist. You're what they call an in-house lobbyist. And so you're not on the lobbyist register. All you have to do is go to a politician. They sponsor you a pass. and you basically have an access all areas pass to Parliament House 24/7. You can be in there, and there's just no transparency around who has these, why they're in there, who they're speaking to, and I take exception to that. Like, I think it's the people's house, and lobbying and access, I think, is a good thing. You want to be hearing from people who are affected by legislation and have different views on issues, but we should have more transparency. And so that's been my argument, is that nothing against lobbyists per se, but let's actually have some transparency about who's accessing the building.
Right. That sounds pretty common sense. Have you had any pushback to that, or has it been pretty straightforward? Everyone's up for it?
No, huge pushback. They hate it. I got to send an inquiry up into it, and the evidence was so compelling for the need to do more on lobbying that the major parties teamed up, and their number one recommendation was to have another inquiry at some point. So that is political code for let's kick this can as far down the road as we can. I've got a bill before the Senate. The member for Kooyong, Monique Ryan's also been doing a bunch of work on this. And like, anyone I speak to agrees, like, this is bonkers. Like, this is nuts, the current system. But, it kind of suits the major parties where there is a lack of transparency and no one's really held accountable for who's in there.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt it firsthand, because I'm honestly, like many people probably, I'm not across everything that's being passed and moved through Canberra all the time, but I have taken a real active interest in the way that the gambling reform that was put forward at the end of last year has rolled through, and just bizarrely just feels like it felt to me watching that there was this bilateral or support for this work that Peter Murphy had done, that it would see some regulations put around gambling and where it was put in sport. And then these weird organizations started to pop up in the news saying things like, this will really harm TV and it'll see a drop in football meat. And then it kind of just slowly went away. How does that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is one of the most tragic examples of Parliament putting vested interests ahead of what's good for the community. It was really I think that inquiry was Parliament at its best, where you had people across the political spectrum really working together to say, this is a really important public health issue in Australia. We are the biggest losers per capita in the world. We have all this evidence showing that gambling is being normalised amongst kids, amongst young Australians, because they're just being bombarded with gambling ads. Let's do something about it. So the report had the backing of basically the whole Parliament. Everyone agreed. And 2 years later, we've had nothing happen. No action on gambling advertising. And we've got a Prime Minister who keeps rolling out essentially the talking points of the gambling industry, or keeps saying things that, the head of the NRL, Peter V'landys, keeps saying, that are just so out of line with what the evidence says and what we should be doing. And it's so frustrating. And I think really it's really sad to see a lack of action to protect young people. Like, no one's saying let's ban gambling. If you want to have a punt, go for it. But we've got to stop the normalisation. And now in Australia, we have more under 18s gambling each year than play cricket, than play AFL, than play basketball. That's a very big problem when you've got under 18s thinking that this is just a normal part of life, a normal part of enjoying sport.
So how does it happen? How does it just go away? How does if everyone supports it, how does it go away?
We've seen a lot of pressure from the NRL, the AFL, the media companies that get a lot of gambling ad revenue, and obviously from the gambling companies themselves. They love it. Australia is an absolute. It's a great place to do business. As I said, I think we lose about $31 billion a year as Australians to gambling. That's more than we spend on things like aged care, or we spend on education. We're losing every year. So they've obviously been in the government's ear, and I think the Prime Minister has kind of listened to them rather than listening to the experts. And this was all looked at in the Murphy inquiry. They acknowledged that there would be a need for change and potentially looking at some sort of model to compensate sports. and they recommended a 3-year sort of phased-in ban on all gambling advertising. Which sounds great to me. I remember when I was a kid, I was obsessed with rugby union and absolutely idolized a bunch of players. I really didn't know what sports gambling was.
Yeah, same.
Certainly was. Online gambling wasn't a thing. I know I'm getting old now, but I'm so grateful for that. Like, it just wasn't a consideration for me. And then I look at young people these days, and it's all about the odds and first try scorer, or who's going to kick the first goal, or whatever it might be.
So, do you think having a bit of transparency about the people who are talking to members of parliament would help in this kind of situation? Do you think?
I think it would help to a degree to know who's actually accessing them, and I guess there's a few different parts of that. One is knowing which lobbyists are in Parliament House, then knowing which ministers they're meeting with. Almost every jurisdiction in Australia releases ministerial diaries. Like, this is a list of people that the ministers have met with, except federally they don't. And so there were a real outlier there. And yeah, I mean, it's clearly not working. We're not getting good outcomes, and there's this real default of secrecy at the moment. The Albanese government last term was the second most secretive government in the last 30 years. And an example of this, I've been frustrated with the lack of action on gambling. So I, through the Senate, the Senate voted for the minister to release basically all the briefings on gambling for a bunch of events that she'd been speaking at. And they had redacted, blacked out, full pages, even talking points for a public event that she was going to talk at. Like, how on earth can you not release talking points for a public event? Like, that just seems insane. So I don't know. Something I'm certainly going to keep pushing. And I think more and more Australians are frustrated. Like, sport is there to enjoy, to learn all these great life skills, not to flog off a product that we know can be enjoyed, but can also be really harmful if you get addicted to it.
Yeah, well said. I think everyone, or the most of Australians, agree with you. So I keep fighting, mate. I hope it all goes really well for you. I have a few follow-up questions for you. Did you hear my partner sneeze then?
Yeah.
It's spring down here. Well, firstly, I have. Yeah, exactly. Melbourne's weird on that. But who do you think? Are you across the AFL? Do you have a pick for the? Where, as we record this, no prelims have taken place. But sure, when this comes out, there will be one prelim has been played. Who do you think will win the grand final? Is my question.
Brizzy Lions.
Really?
I mean, they're my team. I moved to Brisbane in 2002. I had never heard of Aussie Rules AFL, but as a 14-year-old, got on the Lions bandwagon. And so I guess I've followed them since, and last year was great to watch.
I would say, with respect, being a Perth, you're a Perth boy, and having like the slightest of accents, you do feel like a West Coast fan to me a little bit.
We actually used to share a preseason training field with the Freo Dockers when I was playing over in Perth, and we'd turn up for training and they'd be running, doing fitness. We'd do our full session and leave, and they'd still be running. So that's so much respect for the fitness and athleticism of AFL players.
The concept of there's always someone who's doing better than you, right? So we're essentially the same age, and you're the most impressive person I've ever met. But then, like, I met the other day Will Ashcroft, who is 21 years old.
I saw the Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like. And a full head of hair.
Yeah, tell me about it. And he's out of contract next year, and he's just going to be the richest man in the world. Yeah. So, and he's 21, and we're 37, I think, or you're 37, I'm 36. So yeah, that's the other thing. On my last question is, your workplace is insane. Like, the people you work around, you've got like Jackie Lambie, who you work obviously closely with in circumstances, and people like Pauline Hanson, who nominated you the other day to run Senate, was it? Or what was that about?
To be the president of the Senate. I think she was just trolling me. She's actually a pretty good troll in there. Totally, like, I had no idea. She didn't let anyone know. So it was it was a good laugh.
She trolled Auntie Donna once. Actually, she makes these animated videos about woke Australia, and she had the ABC on, and the example of how bad the ABC was my group just standing there doing shuckers, and I was like, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good summation of what we do. David, thanks again. Really appreciate your time this week. I hope you enjoy all the finals as they roll out, and stay warm up there in Canberra, and enjoy the roundabouts. And we really appreciate it. And thanks for your time.
Thanks, Broden. It's a great part of the world to live. Cheers.
This is a Grouse House podcast.